Hi, my name is Mike Montaigne. I'm the communication coordinator here at the Rock Bible Church. And on behalf of myself and the staff, we want to just thank you so much for tuning into our YouTube page. If you live here in the area, we would love for you to come and stop by and hang out with us on a Sunday morning. Our service times are 8:30, 10 o'clock, and 11:30. Now, if you haven't liked and subscribed to our page yet, go ahead and hit that like button, and that way you can get a notification anytime we drop a video. Now I'm going to go ahead and let the sermon start, and I hope it has blessings upon your life, and God just really speaks to you through the message. You guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you around.
Amen. Hey, how you guys doing? I stuttered because I was thinking to myself, I'm going to say, "What up, church?" But I didn't say it. I said, "How you guys doing?" Anyway, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for another opportunity for me to do this, to preach and just talk to you guys from this position. It's kind of just blows my mind every time I'm up here that I'm able to do this, that God has granted me the grace to stand here and talk and have a little microphone on my face. So it's good. But let me launch right into it. We've been going through this book of the Colossians, and in this book was written about AD 60, 61, so about 30 years after Jesus had ascended back into heaven. Paul writes this book. This guy Epaphras, right? He's been a believer for a little while. He actually was converted when Paul was in Ephesus. So that's a good way to memorize Epaphras and Ephesus. If you say that 10 times fast, it gets jumbled up very quickly. But anyway, he was converted when Paul was in Ephesus and was there for a little while helping Paul, and eventually Epaphras becomes an elder in a church in Colossia. So when Paul was preaching there, Epaphras became a believer. He grew in the gospel, becomes an elder in Colossia, and finally reports back to Paul about some of the struggles that he's been seeing within this church, the Colossian church. Now, I don't think it's coincidence that we just talked about elders, the importance of elders and deacons in our church, because what we see here is actually the outcome of an elder bringing something up to Paul. Like, he's acting in the role of an elder. So it's like, this makes sense that we just talked about this, and now we're actually seeing a letter written from a guy who was acting in the role of an elder. He was doing a good job, like doing his job type thing. So good for him, buddy. But yeah, so I don't think it's a coincidence. Epaphras was acting in this role of an elder. He brought this to Paul's attention about some of the creeping bad doctrine that was kind of flooding into this church a little bit. And he goes over to Paul. Paul's actually in Rome at the time. He's actually in jail. This is his first imprisonment. So he's in jail. So Epaphras comes. He brings Paul some books. He's like, "Yo, what up, dog? Here you go. Here's some books. Here's your jacket. I hope you're doing all right. By the way, I have some problems in Colossia. You help me out with that?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." So Paul writes this letter to the Colossian church and to Philemon and to another one to Ephesus at the same time. Now, if you know this, or if you don't know, Rome was actually rerouting this road that would go through Colossia. It would go through that town, kind of like, what's that road that's going from Yulee all the way down to, it's like the new 495 is like going all the way down, the toll road, 23 Brandonfield, right? It's kind of like that, rerouting this road, and now we have thousands of people going down 220 at 4 o'clock when I'm trying to get to church. I can't because there's too many bloody people. I can't, anyway. Or anytime on Blanding, it's nuts like that. It's just so many people. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know where they're going, but in my opinion, they're in my way. I'm trying to get to PJs. Just get me there. Better walking. But anyway, so Rome is doing this new road through Colossia, which is funneling all these people through this little tiny town, and it becomes a trade town. And because of that, because there's a lot of people coming into this town, there started to be some weird doctrine that started to spread a little bit. And because Paul was gone, there's their image, their vision of Christ started to blur a little bit. Now, I thought this was interesting because this is like all the other books that we went through, right? When we went through the Corinthians, we went through 2 Corinthians. what was going on there? They were a trade town right next to the water, bunch of people coming through, a church that was doing well and then got corrupted by some bad theology, right? Or Thessalonians was kind of the same way. They were doing a lot better than the Corinthian church, but still had some weird doctrine that would float in. And that's why Paul was right. It seems like a common theme within Paul's ministry is these churches that are set up, they start growing, they're doing well, and then some weird doctrine comes in, and then he writes a letter to them and is like, yo, check this out. The Jesus that you are now talking about is not the one that I preached to you, type thing. Seems like to be a common theme. And it's interesting to see that now in the book of Colossians, to see how like they're still like wrestling with this theology, some bad theology about Jesus. And it proves that no matter what happens out there, a lot of people coming in, a lot of people going, people breeding some bad theology and some weird stuff going on. No matter how crazy things get out there in the world, we can still thrive in here. That's everything that we learned last year, right? We can still thrive in here as a collective of people, as a body of believers, even though the government is crazy, people are weird, there's just weird things going on out in the world. And that's why it's important for us to gather in here as a body of believers, to encourage, to spur one another on, to do this together. Now, the growth of these churches that we've been looking at and how quickly they get the gospel confused, it proves that we are called to know this gospel. We must know for sure what the good news is, what this message is. We must know this 100%. And when we come to know this gospel, we have a responsibility to proclaim that whole message, the whole thing, not just part of it, not just a little bit of it, not just one section of it or what just applies to you or in the other stuff you don't like, the whole gospel, the whole message of truth, which is a life that Jesus lived, a life that we could not live, right? He died a death that we should have died to be raised again for our abundant life. That whole gospel we must proclaim. And when we do this, it becomes glaringly obvious that it will place pressure upon us, both individually and corporately. You've probably seen this. You start coming to church and your family's like, weirdo, looking at you strange. You start talking about Jesus and they're like, what are you talking about? But corporately too, like when we start doing something good as a church and we're believing, we're following and chasing after Jesus, other churches or other people or other businesses are going like, those people are weird. What is going on over there? And because that pressure is upon us, it points and proves that we need to be the church in here, but we also need to be the church out there. We need to be the church out there. When we are scattered, when we're gathered, it's like, yeah, okay, it makes sense. We encourage one another, we love one another, we tell each other about the gospel. But when we're out there, when we're scattered, we also need to be just as much the church out there, encouraging one another, supporting one another, even rebuking one another, mourning with each other, but rejoicing with each other as well. We need to be the church here and out there. And this is the new idea that we've been, the word of the year, I guess, that Pastor Nate has been using, is this idea of gathered and scattered. And we are both the church in a gathered area and in a scattered area. So when we jump into our text today, we kind of get a glimpse of this. I love that we read it beforehand because then I don't have to, but I love just looking at it and kind of explaining it so you guys get a little bit more context. So here I am. Here we go. Verse 1, you guys know this one. Verse 1 and 2, from Paul, all right, right into the saints in in Colossia. Okay, that's easy enough. Grace and peace to you. Verse 3, he says, we always give thanks to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, when we pray for you. Since when? Since we've heard about your faith in Jesus Christ and the love that you have for the saints. And then he kind of says like a more of a statement. He says, your faith and your love have arisen from the hope that is laid up for you in heaven, which you've heard about in the message of truth, the gospel, from the first day that has come to you. Your faith and your love has arisen from the hope that is laid up for you. The hope. So because of this hope, because of the gospel, you have a deeper measure of faith in your God, but also you have a stronger love for your fellow brothers and sisters. Someone had preached to them. They heard, their lives were changed, their minds were changed, their faith and love in God and their love for others is noticeable. People are noticing these things. They have tasted and seen that the hope that they have in Christ is good, and they're putting it into action. And then he says, he gives this example. Just as in the entire world this gospel is bearing fruit and growing, just like that, it's also bearing fruit and growing in you. It's also bearing fruit and growing among you from the first day that you heard it. The hope laid up for them in heaven has the same effect for us. The hope laid up for that, the hope that they had, they held on to that hope, has the same effect on us. And what I mean by that is this message is growing and bearing fruit in the entire world. The entire world. Not just the known world, not just America, not just Rome, no, that word for world is cosmos. It's everything, the entire world. For example, have you guys seen this book, The Legend of the Three Trees? Anybody know that book? Well, we're going to read it right now. You guys ready? Okay. No, I'm just kidding. We're not doing that. It's not library time or anything like that. This book is really interesting, and I think it gives a good illustration of what this idea means. The gospel is bearing fruit and growing in the entire world, not just in a known world. At the time, Rome was like the known world. There's a little bit of stuff going on in Asia, and specifically East Asia. There was a little bit going on in South America, but really the known world was just Rome. So when it means the entire world, this book explains what this means. There's a story of three trees. Well, the first tree wanted to be a treasure chest. Grew up big and strong and was like, I'm going to be a treasure chest for a king. He's going to put all of his jewels and all of his coins inside, and I'm going to be the best. And when he grows up big and strong. He's about a few feet wide, and somebody cuts him down and makes him into a feeding trough. Not what he was thinking. There's another tree that was like, I want to be I'm going to be a giant sailing ship for a king. I'm going to be a giant sailing ship, and I'm going to grow big and strong. And this tree grew, 4 feet wide and was ready. And somebody came and cut him down, and he was turned into a fishing boat. The third tree wanted to be something else, and somebody cut him down, and he became the cross. And the illustration, there's a lot of analogies within this book, and it's beautiful, but the thing that I noticed and was brought to my memory when I was looking at this text was the redemptive narrative throughout history, but also throughout all of creation, proves that God not only exists, but he's working out everything through this message of truth, through this redemptive narrative. These trees thought they were going to be one thing, but God created them and formed them to hold baby Jesus, to allow him to preach on a boat and to die on a cross. The message of truth is medicine to every heart. The hope that's laid up for us in heaven is medicine to every heart in the entire world. The entire world. So it does not matter whether it does not matter your nationality. Does not matter your economic status. Does not matter whether you're male or female. Does not matter. Because that message of truth will penetrate the deceitful heart of all mankind. Which means this is an opportunity for salvation for all. So let me give you another example. Do you guys remember the woman at the well? The woman at the well. Samaritan woman, some might know it as, right? Jesus goes on this trip with all of his buddies, and they take they reroute a little bit, and they go into Samaria. And if you know anything about that, Samaritans are like they're like the half-breeds, right? Nobody really likes them, blah, 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 blah. And Jesus, all of his Jewish buddies go into Samaria, and it's kind of weird. And they go to a well. Jesus is like, all right, we're hungry. I'm hungry. Just go into town. Go grab some food. We'll be, and I'll be hanging out right here. And he's hanging out by the well, and the Samaritan woman comes up in the middle of the day, mind you, which is not the time to go to the well. She comes out in the middle of the day for a specific reason. And Jesus sees her and says, "Yo, I didn't bring a bucket. I see you got a bucket. I just need a glass of water. You just help me out real quick." And she's like, "Why are you talking to me?" Like that. Like, "Why are you talking to me? Like, I'm a Samaritan woman. You're obviously Jewish. Look at that curly hair. That's, like, you are Jewish. Why are you talking to me?" And they have this conversation. And she tries to switch the conversation. She tries to change the conversation. And Jesus starts pointing to her specifically, into her sin. And he says, "Go home and grab your husband, and we'll explain it." And she's like, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus says, "You're right. You've had 5, and the one you're living with now is not even your husband." And her mind is like, "Whoa, how'd you know that? That's a little creepy. What, you've been spying on me?" Right? But it blew her mind that this guy knew everything that she had done. And her eyes were open in a split second. And she realized that she's talking to the Messiah of the world. The Messiah. She's talking to him. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, this is God. This is truly the Messiah." And she goes home. She goes back into town. She tells everybody, "I met this guy. He's the Messiah, I swear, because he told me everything that I've ever done." In that split second, she saw and believed in God. Now, there's another story a little bit earlier in John chapter 3 that's actually the kind of the opposite of this story. You might know it. There's a really high-ranking Jewish leader called Pharisee, and he's really busy during the day. Really busy during the day doing Pharisee stuff. I don't know what Pharisees do. Eat bread, and I don't know what they do. Anyway, and because he's so busy, he's trying to get in touch with Jesus, and he calls him up, and he's like, "Yo, man, I'm busy all day, but let's pencil in something for tonight. Is that cool?" And Jesus is like, "Yeah, I got you." And then they pencil in a meeting. I'm sorry, like they're in the hood or something. Like, "Yeah, boy, yeah, yeah, I got you." So they pencil in a meeting for like 10 o'clock at night, really late at night. And finally, Jesus is hanging out with his boys. He's just hanging out with his boys. And And finally, his 10 o'clock meeting shows up, and this guy's name is Nicodemus, and he shows up and he's like, listen, what do I need to do to be saved? What do I need to do to be saved? And Jesus is like, you got to be born again. And Nicodemus is like, born again? Like, I just got to crawl back in there? Are you kidding me? That doesn't make any sense. How would I, like, feet first maybe? I don't, like, how does that work? I don't know, right? And Jesus is like, no, that's not what I was talking about at all, bro. Like, you're way off. You must be born of the Spirit. You got to be born not just of water, but of blood too. You got to be born of the Spirit. You got to be born again. And the end of this conversation, we don't see the conclusion of like a converted heart. And in fact, there's a few more stories throughout the Gospels that you'll see Nicodemus there, and it's like, oh, that's Nicodemus. Oh, he's saved. Huh? How about them apples? But that one night wasn't the deciding factor. At least we don't know. It could have been. There's something that's similar in these two stories that has to do with our hearts, that we have in common with, that we too are born into Adam. We're born into sin. We too have 5 husbands and live with some dude right now before you start thinking I'm weird. I mean, we're idolatrous. We have idolatrous hearts and idolatrous hearts. Our hearts are riddled with this parasite called sin. Riddled with parasite called sin. And the only medicine that can that can tear out that parasite is a message of truth. The only thing that can fix that is a message of truth, because that is the only medicine that changes the heart of a sick with sin person. I totally messed up that sentence, but you get what I'm saying. Now, as I'm thinking about that, and as I realized that the message of the truth is the medicine to every heart, the entire world, I noticed that the message of truth is life-changing. It is life-changing power. The power of the message of the cross is life-changing. Romans chapter 1, verses 16 through 17 says, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel." Paul's writing this to Rome. "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is God's power for salvation to everyone who believes, first the Jew and also to the Greek. For the righteousness of God is revealed in the gospel." Did you guys see that? The righteousness of God is revealed in the gospel from faith to faith, and as it's written, the righteous shall live by faith alone. Oh, or that version. Paul goes on to write to the Philippian church in chapter 2, and he says, "Continue working out this salvation. Continue working out your salvation with awe and reverence, for the one bringing forth in you both the desire and the effort for the sake of his good pleasure is God." Listen, when the whole gospel is at work within you, it brings forth this abundant life. When the gospel is actually moving and changing you, it's bringing forth fruit, life, Zoe life, abundant life, real change when that gospel is moving. A week ago, I had an opportunity to, before I get into that story, I do realize that some of you may be thinking, I've been trying to change for years, and this gospel hasn't done anything. Like, why? Why should I listen to you, guy with nice hair? Right? Just because you're cute doesn't mean anything. Why haven't I changed yet? If this gospel really has that type of power to change everything from the inside out, how come it hasn't happened to me yet? For some of us, that change takes a little bit longer, like Nicodemus. And I say, God just had more grace for me. He just had more grace for me. It took longer because he just has more grace in store for me. It built up for me. Here you go, Chris. Because I'm a knucklehead. These two stories, the woman at the well with a bitter and bruised and hurting heart, comes to the well in the middle of the day and meets Jesus once. One time meets Jesus. And her life is changed. And she goes home and she tells hundreds of people. Nicodemus had a few conversations. A week ago, I had the opportunity to be in this prayer meeting. My wife, every Tuesday night, she prays with a group of people for Togo, Africa. Say that too fast, it sounds weird. If you don't know where Togo is, it's like in the armpit of Africa. You know, you got the big round, and it's like right in the middle there. There's a really good surfing spot there, which you guys don't care about, so I don't know why I said that. But I do know. But anyway, Togo, Africa. My wife knows some missionaries there, and she's in this prayer meeting with some people, and they send an email out every week with a list of the things that they've been praying for. And this one particular night, I usually, it starts at like 7 and ends around 8:30 or so, and that's right around when Hannah goes to sleep, my 2-year-old. She's going to sleep, and I usually start the process, and Natalie comes in and kind of finishes up. But this time, Hannah was not going down. She was fussing all night, didn't want to take a bath, didn't want to do anything. She wanted to play books and magnetiles, and that's what she's going to do, and she did not want to sleep. And so Natalie goes in there to kind of calm her down. But meanwhile, she's in the middle of this prayer meeting that's on Zoom, and so I go and sit down and take her place. And I'm reading this list that's been emailed about like what's been going on in Togo, and it blew my mind because in Africa, they're dealing with the same stuff that we're dealing with over here, like in our church. And I was like, wow, that goes to show that like this message of the gospel is doing the same thing everywhere. We're finding everybody. So let me read one off for you. So they finished up a summer camp, or I think it's a camp that they finished up. They ended up having over 30 kids, which was an increase from the other days. The week ended with a total of 29 salvations, with about 50 kids hearing the gospel and having those gospel conversations. Not to mention the adults that were around, and hearing the gospel from afar. This was also the first camp where it was 100% led by young Togolese leaders without the presence of a missionary. So it's complete indigenous missionaries doing the work in this town. And I was like, wow, that kind of sounds like what we're doing over here. Like we're seeing these salvations here and there, and have a summer camp and things like that. But how we're also being missionaries, essentially, in our own hometown, making disciples. There was another prayer that I saw that was about a witch doctor and how he's heard the gospel multiple times and finally comes to know Jesus that week. A witch doctor. Like voodoo is a big thing over there. And voodoo is like no mercy, like no grace. They just wrath. I don't even know how it works spiritually speaking, but it's pretty dark, right? And for this person, this guy, to hear the message of grace, the message of truth, and change their life is crazy. It's mind-blowing for us, a voodoo witch doctor. But we have the same thing over here. It's not voodoo. It's, I don't know, other things. It blew my mind. And Natalie actually texted me this morning. She texted me a picture. Check this out, guys. You probably can't see it. I should probably put it up on the screen. She texted me this morning that this witch doctor who gave his life to Christ, this morning was praying over the church. Like mind blown. How does this work? How do the words of like a broken, dying man from stage speaking over a crowd of people, how does that change the lives of broken, dying men? I don't know. I have no idea how that works. Right? How does the story of a guy who bled and died on a cross fix anything? I don't know how that works spiritually. How does a sacrificial atonement work? I don't know. How many licks does it take to get the son of a Tootsie Pop? I have no idea. I'm not the smartest guy, but what I do know is for most of us, we caught a glimpse of Jesus. And we said to ourselves, woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips. And Jesus says, I know, that's why I came. The message of truth is medicine to every heart, no matter where you're from. And it has this power, this life-changing power that I don't think we can truly and fully understand how it works, how the Spirit moves. But what I do know is the message of the truth is unceasing. It's never going to stop. The believers in Colossae heard this message. They held on to the hope that was stored up for them. They trusted in God in that very moment, and from that point on, their faith in God and their love for the saints began to grow and bear fruit. The message has not changed for us, ladies and gentlemen. That message is not different. In fact, from Genesis 3 till now, until Christ returns, it's the same message. Like even before Jesus came, the message of the cross was there. Can you believe that? Like the prophecies from thousands and thousands of years before Jesus even steps onto the scene as a man, they were being told. And as soon as Jesus comes, thousands and thousands of prophecies were fulfilled. This church heard this message that they've heard for years and years and years. And it changed their life. And it changed their hearts. And this message will never stop. It will not change. The same message that wrecked the life of a Jewish a Pharisee who would kill thousands of Christians, that same message wrecked my life when I was 14. That same message wrecked my life again when I was 18. That same message wrecked my life again when I was 22. And it wrecked my life this morning. That message changes us. It does not change. It's unceasing. It's going to go on forever. From the beginning of time until the end of time. There's coming a day where God will come to judge the living and the dead. And no one can stop that. There's nothing we can do to stop his gospel from moving forward. When I was doing some more research on this, I came across the battle hymn of the Republic. You guys know the song? Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Okay, anyway. I thought you guys would get a kick out of that. No? That's funny. Anyway. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was written in 1861, so right around the Civil War. It's written by a woman in her third story like window, looking out on this battlefield. And these two armies were just sitting there at a standoff, essentially, for a little while. And she writes, "Mine eyes has seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on." This is unceasing from the beginning. Then she goes on and says, "I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar In the evening dew and damps, I could read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. And ultimately, a lot of death would happen on that battlefield. She knew it was coming. She saw it coming, literally right before her eyes. Then she writes this. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. For our God is marching on. This, from the beginning of time to the end of time, this gospel is moving in all of the world. And that gospel is the same medicine that shaped Paul's heart. It's the same medicine that shapes our heart. That cleans us out of this parasite called sin. And it's life-giving. It's life-changing. It's life-altering. And it's never going to call retreat. This is not a game, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a couch. This is a battleship. We have to be on guard for each other, for the sake of one another. We must do this together. That's why this idea of being the church scattered is so important. We must do it together. So how do we do this? How do we do that? Of course, you try harder, do better. But I think because the message of truth, because it's unceasing, our pursuit of it should be unceasing. In fact, John 15 pretty much says that. John 15, if you remember, says, Jesus says, "Remain in me and I will remain in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me." Then he says, "I am the vine. You are the branches." Don't forget that. "I am the vine. You are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him bears much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. You can accomplish nothing." If the message of the cross bears fruit, then our pursuit of it needs to be unceasing. If the message of the cross is unceasing, then our pursuit, our understanding of it, has to be unceasing. Just like this message got a hold of my heart when I was 14, and I listened to it for about 4 weeks. And then again at 18, when my life fell apart, I heard this gospel. And I said, I'm going to follow that. And I followed it for about a year. And then when I was 22, I was like, you know what? That message, there's something about it. There's something different. And it's starting to mess with my heart. Not just my life, not just my behavior, but it starts to mess with my heart. And I was like, you know what? That's it. I'm done. Take all of me. Take everything. And he took that parasite that was in my heart, ripped it out. And he says, I'm going to flip everything upside down. And throughout my life, this message constantly comes to my mind and constantly changes my heart. And then even this morning, as I'm driving here to deliver this to you, I realized I can't do this on my own. I have to abide in the vine. But I'm fighting it the whole way. I'm like, I can do it. I can do it myself. I got it. I'm okay. No. It was wrecking my heart even in the first service. I could barely get through the sermon without going off my notes and started talking to myself the whole time, which would have been hilarious. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a game, and we have to do this together. We're not on a cruise ship, we're on a battleship. We're on a battleship here and out there. So pursue Christ every day, because that gospel is pursuing us and working in our lives across the world. Let me pray.